For 10 years, the Greek army lived in the dirt outside these walls. Then came the morning the army simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but the silence of an abandoned camp and a single, massive wooden structure. Before this silence, the war was defined by a decade of failed kinetic force. Every attempt to breach the city through direct combat ended in a stalemate on the sand. The city was a masterpiece of ancient engineering. These stone foundations were so deep and the walls so thick that traditional siege engines and ladders couldn't create a single viable breach. When a physical perimeter is this dominant, brute force stops being a variable. The Greeks realized that if they couldn't break the walls, they had to find a way to make the walls irrelevant. The shift came from Odysseus. He was a king who specialized in strategic, unconventional intelligence, a man who looked for the friction points in an enemy's mind rather than their armor. He realized that no wall is truly impenetrable if the attacker can find a way to bypass the physical barrier entirely. His plan was a radical departure from military tradition. Build a hollow monument large enough to house a strike team and leave it as a trophy for the victors. This was the birth of a new tactical concept. The Greeks would stop fighting Troy's physical strength and begin targeting their psychological expectations. The horse was meticulously designed to look like a sacred offering. It wasn't just a container, it was a religious prop intended to trigger the Trojans' sense of piety and tradition. To make the deception believable, the Greeks had to sell the narrative of a total retreat. They torched their own camps, filling the sky with the smoke of an army that was supposedly done with war. They boarded their ships and sailed out of sight, physically removing every trace of the threat from the Trojan horizon. A suspicious object appearing in a vacuum is a red flag. But a suspicious object appearing as the final piece of a 10-year puzzle is a relief. By controlling the environment around the horse, the Greeks transformed a weapon into an unquestionable symbol of a war that had finally ended. The Trojans emerged from their gates for the first time in a decade. They found themselves standing on the same ground where so many had died, staring up at the massive wooden structure left in the dust. One voice tried to break the illusion. The priest Laocoon warned his people that the gift was a trap, famously telling them to never trust a Greek offering. A spear was even thrown into the side of the horse. It hit with a distinct hollow resonance, a clear physical indication that the structure wasn't a solid offering. But the Trojans were exhausted. They wanted the war to be over so badly that they instinctively filtered out the evidence of the hollow echo. They chose the comfort of the empty beach over the warning of the spear. In an act of tragic irony, the Trojans themselves provided the labor to bypass their own defenses. They pulled the Greeks' greatest weapon directly into the heart of their city. That night, the city fell into its first peaceful sleep in 10 years. The celebrations were over, the torches were low, and the Trojans believed they were finally secure behind their unbreakable walls. In that silence, a hatch in the underbelly of the horse swung open. The strike team descended into the sleeping city. Their mission required no heavy weaponry. They simply walked to the main gates and pulled back the bolts, opening the doors from the inside. A decade of external pressure had failed to move these gates. One single minute of internal access made them useless. The Greek armada, waiting just off the coast, poured through the wide-open gates. The city that couldn't be conquered was suddenly defenseless. By sunrise, the legendary towers of Troy were reduced to smoke and ash. The city's collapse wasn't the result of a superior weapon or a larger army. It was destroyed by a story the Trojans were tricked into believing. The fall of Troy remains a warning. Even the strongest stone walls are entirely irrelevant if you can be convinced to open the door for the enemy.